air compressors like this are handy items to have to air back up when you've been off-roading. But to be honest, they don't even begin to compare to the convenience of an onboard air system. All we have to do is turn ours on, plug in the air hose, and air up our tires. In this video, we're going to show you how to install one yourself. Most importantly, how to properly, safely provide power to it. This is what you'll need. A compressor, duh. We've been using Viair compressors for many years on all of our builds. They're rock solid and they've never let us down. In fact, we've been using their medium duty system, including their air tank, in our 4Runner for years. Recently, they came out with this more powerful unit, so we figured we'd give it a try.
By far the most important aspect of installing it is a proper power supply to avoid failure or a catastrophic fire. That's comprised of 4 elements. Number 1 is the proper size wire for the amount of current the compressor uses and how long that wire needs to be. In our case, it's going to be about 12 feet from the power supply to where the compressor is going to be mounted. And the peak amp draw of the compressor is 30 amps. So we'll be using 8 gauge wire. That's plenty big enough. 2 fuses, the first and most effective line of defense. Placed on the positive side as close to the power source as possible, that's most likely going to be your battery. 3, a switch of some sort. We got one from Onboard Air and it fits perfectly here in our dash. And that brings us to 4, and that's a relay. Virtually all switches in the automotive world that's used in or on the dash will never handle the 30 amps of power our compressor requires. They will literally burst into flames. Most, like this one, will only be safe up to 3 amps. So a relay is absolutely necessary. Think of a relay as a heavy-duty switch that's turned on by a light-duty switch. If you want to learn more about how a relay works, we produced a video some time ago. We'll put a link to it down in the video description.
Now let's get to the wiring. Viair has their own recommended method. Here's a diagram of it. This works great if the compressor is close to the power source. Ours, as Mark mentioned, is about 12 feet away, so we're doing it an alternative way. This is a diagram of what we have to accomplish. We're going to break this down into the 2 electrical circuits that are involved. First, the high amp power going to the compressor. It starts at the main power source, in our case, the positive terminal of the starter battery. We could connect to the positive post on the battery, put in an inline fuse, and then right to the relay.
But we have a custom fuse and relay panel that we can tie directly into. It has large cables coming in from the starter battery, protected by a breaker. Then it's distributed to the 2 fuse boxes we have here. We're going to be using this spot to tie into.
After passing through the 30 amp fuse, the power then goes on to the number 30 terminal on the relay. The power coming out of the relay going into the compressor is here at the number 87 terminal. The size or gauge of wire we need going to the compressor is determined by how many amps the compressor uses. In our case, 30 amps. And the length of wire, which is about 12 feet. There are charts online that you can use for that. Ours comes out to 10 or 8 gauge. In our case, we always go with the bigger size, so 8 it is. We ran along the frame, up into the cabin through a rubber plug to where the compressor will be mounted. The ground for the compressor comes from a bolt in the frame and is routed up through the same plug. On the end of both negative and positive, we put a heavy-duty Anderson plug. This will make it easy to connect the compressor to the power.
Let me explain how the power comes into the compressor. This on top, this is a little tiny air tank, and this is a pressure switch. The positive power comes up and it goes through this switch first and then down to the motor on the compressor. The negative goes directly to the motor. This switch turns the compressor on when the tank gets below 110 psi, then turns it off when the pressure reaches 145. Now in Viair's diagram that you saw earlier in the video, these wires actually go to the switch on the dash. But we didn't want to run those wires the full 12 feet also, so we did it this way. And this switch does handle the 30 amps that the motor takes.
Now for the other circuit, the low amperage one that'll send power to the relay, turning it on. It's probably best for this to get the positive power from a source that's only on when the key is on. That way there's no chance of accidentally running the battery down. But we're using a convenient spot here on our fuse panel under the hood. That power comes from the fuse through the big rubber grommet in the firewall and goes into the switch that we have mounted in the dash. Are you wondering how we put the switch in the dash? In the video description, we put a link to one of our other videos. There, we tell you how to take this part of the dash apart and how to wire the dash lights into the new switch. We also put links to most of the parts we used in this video install in the video description. When the switch is turned on, power will be sent out through this wire to the number 86 terminal on the relay. The ground for this circuit comes out the number 85 terminal to a chassis ground.
We're mounting our compressor here in the back in this nice little wheel well area here. We have it bolted to this tray that slips in and out. So I'll just first try to do this with one hand, plug in the Anderson plug, and then just pop it down into its position. Just like that. Where we're mounting ours, we also hang cords for other things and our air line. All compressors get hot, sometimes very hot. We don't want to take a chance on these items coming into contact with the compressor and possibly melting. We made this simple shroud out of a piece of aluminum that's going to be bolted right here, and that will keep these from touching the compressor. Speaking of getting hot, when we're all done, we're going to have a tall drawer system sitting here, and this is where we store our portable solar panel. So there's not going to be a lot of air movement around this compressor. To prevent the compressor from getting too hot, overheating, we mounted a small fan right here. The air intake for it is behind, and the outlet is right here, and it blows right down on the compressor. To get power to it, which is less than 1 amp, we tied in smaller gauge wires into that same Anderson plug. And then all we have to do is plug it in like that with an inline fuse. The fan only comes on when the switch to the compressor is turned on. We got everything buttoned up there. Now all we have left to do is plug in the air hose, and that goes from the compressor, plugs in here, and we have a hose that goes down through that same big rubber grommet down here across the other side to an outlet on our bumper.
It's all wired up. Now let's test it. So the compressor started and the fan came on. Pressure in the small tank got to 145 psi and turned the compressor off. When the pressure gets below 110 psi, it'll automatically turn back on.
Our 33-inch tires are deflated to 18 psi. Let's see how fast the compressor can air them back up. So going from 18 psi to 38 psi in our 33-inch tires took a little less than 2 minutes. That is a whole lot faster than our old compressor.
So the new compressor airs up our tires a lot faster than the old one, and that's always a good thing.
I'm glad we got rid of that big air tank underneath, because in our application it just wasn't useful. And I'm glad we put that fan in to keep it cool. It may be overkill, but that's what Wanderlost installs are all about.
You got that right. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button.
And we hope you consider subscribing to our channel. Thanks for watching.
So we are doing an alternative something. Me.